Hello, everyone. Welcome to Chirpin Time. I am your host, Davis Shoulders. This is a video podcast series with our Little Birds literary agency in which we chirp about all things books and things in the book world. And today we have the pleasure of talking with Rachel Weaver, who's the author of the memoir Dizzy that came out from West Virginia University Press this February. And I'm so excited to have this conversation. This book, the title alone tells you so much, but there's so much to the journey that Rachel went on. And so I'm really excited to be talking to her. To get us started, Rachel, will you just tell us a little bit about yourself and the journey that led you to this book?
Sure, thanks for having me. Let's see. I am a writer and a writing instructor. I teach in an MFA program on the East Coast and in a 2-year program at a literary center in Denver. The journey that led me to this book was very long and arduous. I woke up when I was 31 years old, a couple days before graduate school started, debilitatingly dizzy, and then spent 10 years getting passed around from doctor to specialist to specialist, as everyone was completely stumped as to what the source of the dizziness might be. Once it was diagnosed, then it was another 8 years of trying to figure out what might alleviate the symptoms or even just lessen them a bit.
Yeah, that's quite a way to discover just out of the blue something that's happening to you. No warning signs, no lead ups, being in this vulnerable space. But you're no a stranger to vulnerability, to risk, to adventure. One thing that I enjoyed heavily about this is the nature component, that your time spent in the Alaskan wilderness. So I want to start with that question of sort of the wildness of your experience, your intrepid nature that you already had, and then coming across the wildness of this health journey and having to pursue doctor after doctor. Um, I wonder if you feel like you were prepared for the wildness of the health by the wildness of the world.
Yeah, I think a little. I worked as a field biologist for the Forest Service for years. We were studying lots of different things, songbirds, raptors. I also was working on a bear project at the time. The state and federal agencies were trying to figure out the population sizes of bears, brown bears, and black bears on all these uninhabited islands in Southeast Alaska in order to set appropriate tag limits for the bear hunters that were coming up in the fall. Um, so, I saw more bears in a work week than I did humans. I would get dropped off by float plane or helicopter or boat for 10 days at a time. Sometimes we would fly in and out each day, but more often than not, I was in the backcountry for a period of time. Um, and I went straight from that experience into being a very compromised, debilitated, sick woman in these interactions, these clinical interactions with usually men, sometimes women. And I started noticing how often the same dominant and submissive behavioral patterns were playing out in the clinical setting as they did in the backcountry between humans and bears. And I don't know that it exactly prepared me for it. I mean, certainly Alaska taught me a lot of things about self-reliance and tolerating discomfort. But I think I was mostly fascinated just by the overlap in these seemingly totally disparate situations. And so when I started writing the book, well, first I wrote the illness narrative, and I was like, well, that doesn't make for a great book because it's one dimensional and it's pretty sad for a long time, although it does end, hopefully. But I started playing around with incorporating that thread of the Alaska stories, and some other adventures I had. I also worked on sailboats um, in my early 20s, and I started incorporating some of those adventurous stories into the illness narrative, and I found this great mirroring and overlap after lots of trial and error. Yes, I would say the process of writing the book helped me understand the ways in which all that adventuring in life sort of prepared me or just gave me an interesting foundation to look at or to perceive the medical journey through.
Well, I think it works as a great metaphor, and the ease of reading and writing and just like shows how life is. You know, like life is not one specific topic that we get to lift out and put on the page. And you're juggling a lot of things all at once. So I guess what I want to go into, we'll dig into the health scene of this all, you know, the health paradigm, because this is in a narrative medicine series, you know, this is all of these questions that come up. What is, you know, I just want to say sometimes I'm with you on the doctors. I'm like, what is your problem? You know, are you not listening? We've got this spreadsheet. You know, I found myself later like, come on, oh, maybe this doctor will be it.
Right.
Um, but you know, just from the armchair of being a patient, right, and being and us readers, you know, we want to throw our hands up at our healthcare system for a lot of reasons. But what is something that is sort of tangible that you could give to other people experiencing? Because I think it's affirming for anyone who's experiencing an unknown diagnosis for a prolonged sense of time. Were there any sort of tests or evaluations or ways of speaking with the doctors that you could find out like, oh, this is going to be a good one. Okay, we're going to try to get some answers, you know. How do you advise that journey having been through it for 20 years?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know that I definitely don't have like an end all be all answer to that question, but it became well, with high stakes, it became a game almost of how do I interact in these, 7 to 10 minutes that I've got with this doctor or clinician in a way that creates a situation that's the most useful to both of us. So it doesn't frustrate the clinician and it leaves me in a place of, hope, I guess, trying something new, sort of collaborative, like let's try to figure this out instead of just getting shut down. Like there's nothing wrong with your, whatever their specialty was. That was the thing that I ran up against all the time was, well, it has nothing to do with your, structural integrity of your spine, or it has nothing to do with your ears, or it has nothing to do with your nervous system or whatever. And then, the doctor would often want to just wash their hands of me. Eventually, I mean, it became very obvious. These are all very, you know, obvious things. I think my story is very unique, but it's also everybody's story. Since I published this book, I cannot tell you how many people have come up to me after reading it or sent me an email just to say, me too. Like I've had all these same experiences, right? I pretty much just put words to what many, many people experience as they engage with the medical world. I think what I came down to that was the most helpful was letting go of that thing we're all taught to believe, which is you show up as a patient, the doctor shows up with all the knowledge and tells you what's wrong with you. That is the case a lot. That is great if that's the case. But when you get to the point of having something very complicated, something that's not easily identified or quantified, it becomes more of a collaborative situation. So I was constantly trying to figure out how do we navigate this time that we have together in order to be collaborative, meaning the clinician comes to that middle ground with all of their medical knowledge, but allows the space for the patient to come to that middle ground with all of their understanding and depth of knowledge about their own body and their own situation. And also, just sort of their sense of what might be going on. And if both people can kind of hold that common or that middle ground, that's where the best conversation, the best collaboration happens. So that really just comes down to personalities, right? So a lot of what I was doing as a patient was trying to navigate all those subtle hints that people give you, body language, like just trying to kind of figure out like who is this person? How do we manage this interpersonal interaction in a way that benefits us both? And, it's kind of true for bears as well in the backcountry. Like they all have their own sort of personality. Everyone's different. They're unique. They're not one thing. What you might do in one situation in an interaction with a bear doesn't always work with the next one, right? So it really became much more about the fact that we are two humans who need to communicate in this in a specific way, and we need to make space for each other. And how do we do that? Which is different from person to person to person. I'm making it sound like it takes a lot of effort, which it kind of does, but also it's what we do in life. It's what we do anytime we interact with people. I just think that when we show up for a clinical encounter, we often just revert to that as a patient. We revert into that very submissive place, and the doctor kind of reverts, or the clinician reverts into that very dominant place. And hanging on to those two roles really subverts the ability to have that clear communication between the two people.
Well, there's so much to that answer. I could see us spinning off into other directions, but the holisticness of the intake form, sort of the power dynamics at play, and the honestly, I mean, I do this, right? Anytime I feel sick or something, it's like I don't know, like something from above help me, and just so,
Yeah.
so so, I've heard about advocating, and I've had some close family members who've gone some serious health stuff, but the ability to advocate in that moment takes like a strategy and a dance and an experience and a wisdom, to sort of be seen as an equal person. So it doesn't feel like an interview, or it doesn't feel like a pitch, like a Shark Tank pitch or something.
Right.
Um,
Right. Yeah.
but
And
also,
yeah, you feel bad, right? Like if you are a patient, typically you're feeling pretty terrible, right? So then you feel kind of submissive or checked out, right? But I think a lot of times that doesn't get you very far in the interaction.
well, and when you're treating your body like a set of data, but you're trying to use your instincts to survive, um, it's it can get really convoluted there,
Yeah.
with trying to say like you can do all your tests, but like I'm the one experiencing this. And I think a lot of people, who are victimized by circumstances have to sort of express things that are beyond their power to express in the moment. So I think, I mean, just case in point, your story alone is just a testament of how you continue to express. Um, and that leads into this other question, which is a bit more of like a personal sense. That's sort of the technical response out in the world that you have to find a way to communicate. But internally, you were going through all of these knocks on your hope, right? The balloon of hope
Yeah.
metaphor that I enjoyed seeing appear. You describe it, and then all of a sudden it was cement, right? And it was
Mhm.
falling down. From a standpoint of like you're here now, you've made it through this journey. I'm sure there's more to go in life in general. But what was that? We talked early. You mentioned, there's a key personal story about your father passing and that affecting, some of how you viewed your life. But yeah, how did you keep your balloon of hope going from an internal, standpoint?
I think the flip side, hope is a hard thing, right? Because you need hope, but also when everyone's telling you just got to learn to live with this, it sort of deflates that hope. But hope is such a tricky thing because every time that you lose it, it's harder to gain it back, I think. So, with each of these doctor visits, I would feel very hopeful that, this person would be the one who would figure out how to help or how to name whatever it was that was going on with me, or would come up with some new way to take the edge off of this 24/7 debilitating symptom of dizziness that I had. and it takes a lot of energy and you have to get over a lot of fear, I think, to regain hope each time. And I found myself constantly pushing against it. Like I didn't want to hope. I just wanted to live through it. And I think sometimes hope gets, or I don't know if it gets confused with, or maybe just the flip side of hope is just determination. I was so determined to try to make my life a little better, a little easier, a little bit more tolerable, my day-to-day life, with these debilitating symptoms that I just kept showing up in front of the next person and the next person and the next person. Often to hear the same thing, like maybe it's not so bad. Maybe you're, inflating this into something that is much worse than it actually is, or maybe it's just in your head, or maybe, all your tests are normal. There's nothing really wrong with you. Maybe this is just stress, whatever. It was not any of those things. It was a very specific metabolic issue.
And as you keep going, I kind of want to drop this in because I noticed that we don't you don't really reference this as chronic illness, right? Like you don't take the bait that people are telling you that, and that is not to say that there are not chronic illnesses that you do have to come to terms with living with, but there was that dance that you had with people telling, just don't look for the solution, just accept that this is a condition. That has to be its own sort of in continuing this answer that you're saying that you wrestled with that you didn't let it go into that category of acceptance of having to live with it.
Yeah, I don't know why. I don't know. I just always thought of myself as a healthy person who had this very debilitating circumstance that surely I could find some way, if not to like fix or cure, I think just to find a way to make it more tolerable in my day-to-day existence so that I could still do the things I wanted to do in life. I mean, I think that's what the book is ultimately about, is about finding ways to modify and power through, I guess, to be able to still do, if not all, then some of the things that you really want to do in life with while living with a chronic condition. I'm not necessarily cured at this point. I still am modifying every day. I modify what I do, what I, how I am in the world so that I can accommodate for the space that this chronic situation takes up in my life. But I did find someone who had some ways for me to deal with it in a way that made it more tolerable.
There's a sense that that's universal anyway, right? That
Mhm.
individuals might have specific flagrant interruptive health issues, right? On the surface issues. That could be emotional, that could be mental, that could be
Yeah.
physical. But I think like the universality of living life with something that is
Yeah.
preventing you from doing what you want to do. Um, so that leads into the question of the writing, right? Because, again, we get nature, we get health, and we get a writing memoir, in once. And there's sort of this fascinating that you're starting this MFA program as you're getting these, and you're and so it's dancing throughout, and you're literally, is it the Ann Carson thing, the cutting out time with a knife, right? You were
Mhm.
cutting out hours at your work and in different places, and when your head wasn't feeling, unbearable. So, was there something about the journey of writing and writing several novels and pitching to agents through this journey? It, is it almost that the impossibility honed your writing in a way that it made you even more hungry to get it out there, or do you think your writing would have been different if you had had all the spaciousness of not dealing with health circumstances?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I really wanted to do just as a person in the world was write books. And writing, creating these worlds and these characters that were living in the world in a way that I was no longer. I was not writing about characters that were dealing with health issues. I was writing about, at the time, I was writing about characters who were living in Alaska, doing a lot of things that I, used to be capable of. And so it became a refuge, it was like this place, this imaginary place that I could go and I could embody um, someone else other than who was dealing with, issues other than what I was dealing with at the time. And so it became, it was a safe space that I could enter anytime I wanted and live in that was a break from what I was currently dealing with. It wasn't, I mean, it was this thing that I was so interested in trying to figure out. Writing a book is not easy. So there was a
No.
lot of troubling things going on in the narrative, like how do I make this person? How do I allow my readers to connect to this person? How do I write a plot? How do I do all these things, right? So there was a lot to figure out, but I also liked the puzzle of that just because it was different than the constant puzzle of my health. It was a place that I like longed to be through all the time. I would much prefer to be working on my book than dealing with my regular life for the most part. Um, so it was something that helped me through the harder parts of my actual life. And then, yes, I would say definitely my writing, me as a writer I was transformed by the ways that I had to go about writing because I couldn't look at screens. I couldn't, like, my eyes couldn't track when I just writing things out on a piece of paper.
I'll have
When
to
I,
say the happiest moment for me was when you found out you could get access to the audiobooks from the
yeah,
library. I was like, yes, that's a hack. Yes,
yeah.
you can still interact with the book
Eh,
world. Yeah.
Totally, totally. Yeah, this was before, the year Audible. So eventually I was allowed into the library for the blind and visually handicapped and had, access to books again, which was fantastic. But, for the most part, for years and years, the only way I could write my own books was to memorize paragraphs and I would pace. It's something about the pacing and the repeating of the paragraphs to rearrange them into a way that I wanted them to be created a certain, sort of musicality to my writing. I think that I probably wouldn't have taken the time to do that had I just been able to, type on the computer and have it come out in the way that it does when you aren't having to modify all the ways that you're writing books. So yes, I would say, I mean, just like anything, every writer is influenced by whatever is happening to them in their life. And books come through our bodies and our experiences and our mindsets. So I would say my writing is absolutely a product of my life experiences in ways that are very clear and then ways that are a little less clear.
You cannot separate it. That much is clear that whatever is happening is going to happen on the page.
Yeah.
And I love that it's almost like you had to become tap back into the oral tradition of it all,
Yeah.
right? We
Yeah.
all know about the romanticism of the typewriter poets or the people who still write everything out by hand, but there is something to that,
There
the
is.
having to compose before you can technically compose, So, uh,
Yeah, yeah, and it was very much like following that oral tradition. Like I would repeat the paragraph to myself over and over until I got it just right, till the timing was right, till the words were right, which is different. That it's a very slow way to write,
yeah.
but it does produce a different type of product for sure.
And you had your husband there to give ideas that you could
Yeah,
tell the agent was his idea.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
and writing is a team, writing is a
yeah,
community.
yeah.
So I thought that was precious. I'm gonna do one more big question and then we'll end it with our fun question, our fun penultimate question we have here at Little Birds. But the word training keeps coming to mind, and I know that this is not what you intended, right, with your life. Like you were trying to survive, right?
Yes.
But when I look at the different categories that you've laid out to us, your determination in the wilderness, to, oh, want to pursue the protection of a certain species by learning how to get certified to tree climb, you think about your spreadsheet that you built and the way that you interacted with your doctors and the way that you said, like, I'm going to do it. But then I keep, I mean, I'm also so touched by your story of your older history and your family and your father and sort of the appearances that he makes in your life. So I'm thinking about all these training, and then I'm thinking about how you're like, I just want the science to work. I just want the science to work. But in everything that you do, you sometimes have to go to these people where you're like, I don't know. Are you going to, is your massage going to magically change my world? Is your energy, and I just wondered, as a person who, has benefited now from the science, right? You've had some, exciting developments by the coda of this book. How did you respond to the sort of surrender and the supernaturality of that experience? Because I see you get stronger in the book. I see you be more open and yet also more stronger. It's not that you close off in the process. It opened you up. And so I'm just curious from just like a general human point, like how do you go about the world now with having gone through this training and having surrendered to crazy possible diagnoses?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, I think that the process of getting older is just moving those boundaries of what you accept as like fine in the world, right? When you're younger, you're sort of like, these are the things I believe in and all that other stuff, I don't know. But then as you get older, you're sort of like, there's room for all these things. And I think that is definitely the process I went through, specifically in the health journey, to where I was like, sure, I'll go see a body worker, I'll go see a whatever, like, who knows? And I definitely had some very interesting experiences. And I think my mind just was, uh, you know, open throughout those various situations I put myself in. I think I've always thought that I have always thought that it's a good idea to put yourself in situations that are outside your comfort zone just to see what happens, because I think that makes for a more interesting life, a more interesting person. And I learned that early on from my dad. He was a big adventurer. Um, and the message that I always got from him was just throw yourself in and see what happens. You'll get, if nothing else, you get a good story out of it. I think that definitely is a big part of what I went through. And now the result, I think, is that, I feel like I have this precious period of time right now where the dizziness has abated. It's still around, but it's not so bad. I just want to enjoy, I want to do as many things as I can before whatever life throws at me next shows up. I think that this is a very important time to do the things that I have not been able to do for all those years, which for me is mostly adventuring around the world with or just around our life, with my teenagers and my husband, and just really enjoying the things that I am capable of doing right now that I may be able to do for long periods of time, or maybe not. Um, I learned early on that life is pretty precious, having lost my dad very early. And I think that these years of struggling with my health so much really reinforced that, when you've got a window, take advantage. Just do the thing, whatever the thing is.
That's a perfect message to take from your book. And I love the sappiness sometimes of where we get when we understand all the work and the journey that we've put into something and the living in the present. You absolutely deserve that. So thanks for giving us the gift of that, of witnessing your journey, and discovering that. Um, So for fun, our final question. It, we will see what again, a Forest Service employee has to say about a particular type of bird. But if your book was a bird, what bird would it be?
Probably a goshawk, a northern goshawk. They're a raptor. They are um, pretty scrappy and kind of fierce, but at the same time, they're very vulnerable to their environment. They're vulnerable to logging, they're vulnerable to humans, but they're going down with a fight for sure.
We need to get the fighting birds category set up.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
we're gonna get a lot of sweet ones, the ones that are accessible to people. But now I'm gonna make a maybe we make a whole deck of pick your bird fighter cards.
yeah, yeah.
So I'm gonna be looking up some videos for sure. Um, well, thank you so much, Rachel. This has been an amazing conversation. I know your book will change lives, and so I hope everyone out there listening to this checks out Dizzy, and read Rachel's other books. She's got fiction that's been published. Um, you can tell us about the most recent one real quick. I don't have the if you wanna share that.
Yeah, the so Dizzy came out in February of this year, and a novel that I wrote came out just about 2 weeks ago. It's called The Last Run. It's a about a commercial fisherman family. It's about a single mom who commercially fishes for salmon in Alaska. They've got one season left to save their boat, their livelihood. She and her father are estranged, and they've got to come together to fish this season with her young son on board and her father, whose life is a disaster. Um,
So you
so
can read
that one
Dizzy and you can see how Rachel was
wrote it.
figuring out how to write
Yeah.
these novels that you
Yeah.
can go pick up and read.
Yep.
So well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thanks everyone for listening. And enjoy Chirpin Time. Little birds, you plant the seed, we spread the word. Take the truth you speak far across the land. Little birds, if you ain't got time to chirp, take your dreams, give them wings to make them soar across the sky. Oh, little birds, oh, little birds, ba-ba-da-ba-ba, little bird, ba-ba-da-ba-ba-ba, little birds. Little birds, little birds, little birds, we spread the word.